Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Mitchell, Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Salem State University. Very excited to have a special guest with us this afternoon as we talk about the WGA strike, what's been going on, what does it mean, and what does the outlook for this process look like. Want to welcome to the conversation 2001 graduate from Salem State, Jonathan Salemi, writer, producer, director, living out in California right now, kind of a little bit in the thick of it, as they might say. Jonathan, really appreciate you taking some time to join us today and talk through this a little bit. How are you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Doing well. Nice and sunny.
Nice to hear that for the most part, the state seems to have dodged some serious weather out there with the hurricanes as well. I know some areas got hit a little bit, but by and large, it sounds like not as bad as everybody was anticipating. So that was good to hear.
Yeah, we got a lot of rain, but that was about it.
Good. So yeah, obviously the last several weeks and probably a little bit earlier into the summer as well, you've been seeing all over television. The WGA is in a little bit of a situation right now with the AMPTP and how that's been affecting their world and what that means for them. I think you're uniquely qualified to kind of speak on this, and we're grateful to you as a Salem State grad for joining us. You are a writer, producer, director. You had your most recent feature film come out in February. So I'm sure to a certain extent you kind of have an idea of what's going on. And so I think the first question for those that are joining us, we're streaming live on Facebook and our YouTube channel right now, is what is the WGA and who are the folks that are the members of it?
Gotcha. So the WGA is the Writers Guild of America. It encompasses all the TV and film writers that are in the union, and it's basically there to help with writers getting fair wages, residuals, and that's like if you have DVD sales or TV shows that are in reruns, that you're properly getting accounting, as well as health and pension. So whereas before, if you're more writing on an indie scale, you're only getting paid for the agreement and not so much having your producers or those above you being held liable for all the residuals that would come in on the back end. At least the WGA provides some safe measures that you're getting all the money that you're owed.
So what we're seeing now is obviously they're on strike. And I think that the important thing to outline for folks is what's been happening and why do they now find themselves in the situation that they're in. I from what I can gather, there's a few key pieces that are especially important to them. But kind of at the macro and then micro level, can you talk a little bit about what's happening with them and why they're striking?
Yeah, so the couple main reasons are technology and then fair pay. So the last time you saw the guild go on strike was, I think, in 2007, and that was because of DVDs. So there was no measures in place for how residuals were given out for DVDs. That was kind of, although it was 2007, it was kind of new technology, and why they struck back then. And you can look at nowadays, whereas now that's streaming. So now you have streaming, which there's not solid numbers for how people are watching a show on Netflix, and then how that money for residuals or back end for the writers. So that's one component, as well as AI. So protecting writers' rights. For, studio would manufacture for a screenplay that's done by artificial intelligence. So that's one part. And then the other part is fair pay, that the writers are getting paid the proper amount, getting proper raises, as well as length of employment. So one of the things length it used to be 13 weeks, and now they decreased to 10 weeks, or I think the new counter offer 10 weeks. So because of that, you're getting people on named shows that are writing those named shows, but aren't receiving the same income they would that show.
Okay, and so I'm wondering, you've touched on a little bit of what's happening, why they're striking. And at this point, for somebody who doesn't exist in that sphere, what does it mean to their industry for this kind of thing to be happening right now?
In whose sphere? Like for the writers? Like what?
Yeah, as for them, for perhaps the studios that they may write for, the series or shows that they may write for. I remember seeing at one point several cast members from The Office, for example, were kind of out there on the picket lines, and you see, performers from other shows. Now, if you're a television studio and your writers are on strike, are we at a point kind of, I don't know the production calendar that well to say, like, is this a time where shows are in production and have things come to a halt because the writers aren't writing, or what is this kind of, how does this impact the industry, I guess?
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's kind of, there's no set time that shows are being made, so they're being made always. And what it's doing is it's putting a halt to any show that was possibly about to get made or is getting made right now. Putting a halt to shows that are no longer in production. And then with the coupling of SAG being on strike, you could take the script that you have and go into production on that script. But now because SAG is on strike and the two unions are standing in solidarity, it puts a complete shut down to the entire industry. So you're not getting any new episodes. No studio films are being made, whereas you can get independent films made.
And I think that leads to kind of my next question, is that, as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, you just had a project come out in February of this year that was, heralded. It received a lot of great acclaim. The Last Deal, you can find it on a number of different streaming platforms. Um, would something like this have any direct correlation to the work you've done or will continue to do?
It can in some senses. So if I were to make that film right now, I could make it right now with the SAG interim agreement. So some people maybe have heard of it as a waiver. It's not a waiver. What it is you're agreeing to SAG's terms going forward. So whatever SAG is countering with the AMPTP right now, is what would happen when that film comes out. So if I were to make The Last Deal right now, I would need to agree to SAG's demands, and SAG is actually encouraging people to sign these interim agreements. It is affecting struck signatory studios. So Disney or Warner, which is behind, I don't know if you can see it, but Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, all these signatory studios are not allowed to shoot at all. If you had a WGA script, you're not allowed to shoot that either.
So certainly no shortage of potential long-term effect. And as we talk about that, I think one of the things that you and I had talked about in trying to put this conversation together was, well, what happens if the strike is resolved before we get the ability to talk about it?
Right. But it didn't.
Yeah, and I remember at the time it seemed like the two groups were making some good headway in the negotiations, but it doesn't feel like what I've been reading lately anyway has led me to believe that something is imminent around the corner in terms of a struck deal or anything like that. So I'm curious, just as someone who's in the thick of it, what is your kind of gut feeling? What's your outlook on when we might be able to have a resolution to it?
Yeah. So what you're referring to for anyone listening is, like, a couple of weeks ago we were emailing about meeting up, and I said, well, we can talk about it, but I think it may be the strike, the WGA strike, may be done by this point right here, and that hasn't happened. And so the WGA and the AMPTP, which the AMPTP is a lot of your studio heads, producers there. So you got like Bob Iger, the head of Warner, Universal, Paramount, and they were meeting quite often. So the WGA and the AMPTP, I believe about a week ago, met like 4 times in that week. It was very positive, but now it seems to have gone backwards, where the AMPTP has hired a crisis negotiator to help to solve and move things forward. So right now, people were guessing, they were like, I remember like a few months ago, we thought this was going to be over in September. So right now it's at a point where everyone's throwing their arms up or hands up that no one knows when the strike is going to be over. I mean, I like to be cautiously optimistic that it's going to end soon, but the moment the WGA strike ends, then they're going to move to SAG, and God only knows when that's going to end. So we may be going till Christmas, and then IATSE, your Teamsters, so all the people behind the camera, I know definitely the Teamsters, their contract is up in January. So you could see them strike. And the Teamsters are involved for the transportation of all your trucks and equipment and all of that. So it's kind of a perfect storm.
And it feels like it's a tipping of the dominoes, so to speak, and that one will finish, and now we're looking at potentially another one, and where's the last domino going to fall?
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think, and you might have touched on this a little bit at the beginning. One of the things that's hard to understand if you don't exist in this space is that people they're trying to make a decent livable wage for the work that they're doing. And I think to a certain extent, those folks that you mentioned, let's talk about IATSE for a second. They cover an enormous amount of work in this country, not just film and television. They do concert production. They do a ton.
Right.
And a lot of, obviously a lot of what happens in any sort of entertainment without them probably may not happen. But it all goes back to those folks just wanting to make a living wage. And I think one of the things that can confuse people is that, the stuff you see on the internet, who knows if it's real and who knows if it's true and whether it is or isn't. One of the things that I have started to see circulating in recent weeks is, they show these pie charts or these graphs that say we're asking Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal to kick in an additional 0.00057% of their profits. Is it really that small of a percentage, and does it really amount to that big of an amount of money? I don't
Yeah.
even know if you would know, but
No, I wish I did. I haven't done enough research into that part, nor have I ever said it. But there's got to be some truth to it if they've been saying it so much. I just don't know what the truth is in that, and how much it exactly accounts for. No. Yeah.
it's been a fascinating thing to watch because, yeah, streaming has been around for, 8, 10, 12 years, whatever it's been now. And I don't, who knows, who knew back then that it would take off the way that it has, to the point where deals were written without that ever being consideration for revenue sharing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think to the point of your pie chart, I don't think the studios have been fast enough to evolve to how streaming is ingested. So what's happening there is you have your Netflixes, which will release an entire season at one time, and it's a little gray in how many people are watching that and what the viewership is, and then how you can equate that into dollars. And then the studios aren't exactly being extremely proactive for what those numbers are by forcing Netflix to give them up. And it's not until now that now they're like, hey, we want a definition for what these numbers look like. So you could say, to the point of the writers and actors, that the studios have sort of been letting it go. They're like, hey, you know what? No one's really asking for this information. We're not going to push to get this information. And so that could be in relation to your pie chart of hey, this could represent 0.005% or whatever. The studios just haven't been in a rush to define what that number is for people that are watching XYZ show.
And it's got to, I mean, you kind of just said it, it's got to be almost impossible to quantify. Whereas, if it's a movie in a theater, there's a simple base number of how many tickets you sold and things like that, where it's just crazy. I mean, you think about, I mean, I have the same, probably like everybody else, 5 or 6 shows on Netflix that I watch all the time. But they're always adding new content. Apple TV's got their own great content, Hulu and Tubi and Fubo and YouTube, and they've all got their own. It's crazy. And I mean, I remember 10 years ago when Netflix was really just becoming a household product, there was definitely not nearly the amount of content then that they have now, obviously. But I can't even imagine how you quantify that and then break it down to a almost molecular level for these individuals who wrote all of this content to say, here's what you're worth while we're still able to remain profitable in this process. It's crazy.
And that's the problem. So whereas DVDs, box office, all that is you can quantify into actual numbers what the sales are. This you can't. Yeah, a buddy of mine, I was talking to him on the phone yesterday. He's a writer. He used to write back in the 80s and stuff like that. And he was saying how, it just goes to show the amount of content that we have nowadays versus back then. He would write a TV show and do an acting job, and that would pay his rent for a couple of months and then supply all his other needs for a few months. And that's all he needed to do. Whereas nowadays, like, you have to do much more. And I think part of it, there's a little bit of a segue, but I think there's just so much content out there right now, like you were saying, that there's only so much money to give towards all that content. And it's like, well, yeah, like, they're not paying, relatively speaking. The writers and actors aren't getting what they got. But at the same time, I imagine CEO pays have gone up tenfold. So, like,
There's a as we're talking about movies and things like that, if you remember the financial crisis 2008, Will Ferrell made a movie with Mark Wahlberg called The Other Guys, and the entire end credits of the movie was talking about it, and this was respective to financial industries, because at the time it was Wall Street and everything like that. The exorbitant increases that CEO pay had seen over like the last 30 years, and I've got to imagine that with the advances of things like streaming and the different ways people can consume content now, the entertainment studios have had to have, and streaming service CEOs have probably had to experience something similar as well.
Yeah, and then to go back for how you quantify, like, you're watching, let's say, Game of Thrones. A lot of these things are determined by how long you're watching it. So, like, when I release a movie on AVOD, which is advertising video on demand, I'm getting X amount of revenue per time that people watch that video, and they can quantify that, so they do know how long each viewer is watching X show. So the technology is there to determine it. Just a matter if they want to do it. And I think, like, the studios haven't been in a mad rush to figure that out, and I think now they are.
It's always like that proverbial, are you still watching pop up from Netflix once you get 4 episodes in without stopping, and they're like, you might have fallen asleep. Well, we just want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna keep playing anyway. Oh, you clicked on this. Here's a trailer. Oh, you want to watch it?
So in looking at, we've kind of discussed it at the macro and micro levels a little bit here. What do you have any kind of closing thoughts, or what do you think is most important for people to know about what's happening? And we've probably touched on a little bit of this already, but what are the key things you think it's important for people to know about this process and why it's important? And then what are your kind of final thoughts on kind of where it stands and maybe the outlook over the next several months?
Yeah, for me, the residuals is a huge part of it. So they need to quantify what that means for streaming, so this way you're paid properly. The AI part is a big factor too, and I think they're being more lenient on that. So the AI part is can the studio write their own script and then hand that off, and then have a writer rewrite it in a shorter amount of time, thus meaning that writer is being employed for less amount of time. So, like, getting work, because we're all basically freelance here. So if now these jobs that would regularly pay me for this much are now figuring out a way to pay me for this much, it's a lot harder to keep getting all these jobs. So think about, like, yourself, like how often can you change jobs and get a new job? Like, if I'm used to getting 2 or 3 jobs a year, but now I have to get 6 jobs a year, it kind of puts a little bit of a strain. So I think length of employment is an important part. Residuals is an important part. And then making sure you get proper health and pension, especially for the actors. Like the actor side of things, that's a whole different story for how they work with their union. I'm not part of SAG, so I can't completely speak to it, but I think there's a bit of a broken system there with SAG for how they're doing their health and pension, and also the amount of their workers that work. Um, Kind of a crazy stat. I'm not sure if you know this, but uh, 20, 26 or 84%, no, 86% of SAG makes $26,000 or less a year. And
Wow.
7% of SAG makes 70,000 or more a year. So I think there's some fixings that they need to do to their process there as well as they can speak for themselves, but I know a big part of there is proper pay increases as well, because relatively speaking, with inflation, neither the WGA nor SAG have gotten proper raises through the.
And that's such a critical piece that, as a person who has health insurance through their job, and I feel very fortunate about that, if you don't have that, it can be very easy to overlook. And we've all seen firsthand kind of the catastrophic effects that long-term medical illness can cause. And so having those securities in place, if you're able to, it's got to be a life changer for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the parts I'm most passionate about is on SAG. I don't know if a lot of people know, but your stunt workers, stunt performers, stunt coordinators are all SAG. They're all under SAG, and the stunt workers, especially the ones that are a little bit older now, like 50, 60 plus, are coming from a time period where they're getting hit by cars or falling off of buildings. And I have close friends that are part of that group, and then to be let go of their health insurance. Like these are basically the equivalent of NFL players. That now imagine you have a linebacker or a tackle that is now being dropped by the NFL insurance. You can only imagine how much pain this person has withstood over the years, getting hit by cars and buses and falling off of things. To drop them from their health is that's one of the ones I'm more passionate about, like protecting our stunt performers, that they're not getting dropped. And I think 12,000 SAG members recently got dropped from their health
Yikes.
insurance. So they really need to protect their people as well as all their members.
Well, Jonathan, I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy these days, but it's been so appreciated to have kind of the keen behind the scenes insights of what's been happening. It's been all consuming in the news for so long now, to be able to kind of again get down to that molecular level and understand on the ground what's happening is important, because as I'm sure the entertainment industry provides an awful lot of jobs and an awful lot of wages for the folks that are in those jobs. And it's not just the people operating the cameras, it's not just the actors, it's the people that write and produce and direct, and you're one of them. And so to be able to have your insights into the conversation has been great. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Whatever color I can add, I'd welcome to add it.
And who knows, maybe we'll get back together again in a few months, depending on what happens with this contract, and then SAG, and then IATSE and the Teamsters. Maybe we'll make a series out of this. Who knows? I hope we don't have to, but
Yeah,
we
I
might be able to.
soon, because the way it's personally affecting me, is I have a script that I'm ready to pitch, but I can't pitch it. So
Your livelihood's on hold.
yeah, so I've got to wait until the strike ends, and then once the strike ends, I probably have to wait a month or so after that, because everyone's plate's going to be full. So I'm looking forward to the strike ending so I can get on too.
Well, we hope for a quick resolution for you for sure. And again, really can't wait to see what your next project is whenever that script gets to see the light of day. And as we are talking live now, we'll go back and we'll link to your most recent production, The Last Deal, in the comments so people can check it out. We'll put up the IMDb for it. Where can people, if they want to stream it now, where can they check it out?
So it's on Amazon, Apple, Vudu, Google, so your favorite platform. Amazon's my favorite. It's also on Stars, so if you have Stars or Encore, you can stream it on demand there. And then if you're in England, we open Friday in the
Oh,
UK.
nice. Very
Yeah,
cool.
we start our international on Friday, so we open in the UK on Friday, and then we start opening in Germany, Northern Europe, the Middle East, all those. So that's very exciting.
It's gonna be a busy guy over the next few months, attending some premieres and things.
Yeah, I hope so.
That'd be great. Well, listen, Jonathan, again, thank you so much. Who knows? Maybe we'll have another opportunity to talk about this in a few months again. See, maybe there'll be an update on what's been happening. But really appreciate you taking the time out for us today. And again, we'll be sure to link out to the last deal in the comments
Thank
for folks that want to check it out for sure.
you. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks, man. Great to talk with you.
You too.
Bye bye.